So we're looking back at one of our news stories. Later today, the government announcing the scale of the cuts in the central grant to councils in England.
Local authorities will have to factor it in when they decide how much they can spend on things like street cleaning and social care. Well, our correspondent Mike Sargent is in York for us this morning. Morning, Mike.
Good morning. Well, they say that ultimately all politics is local, and today councils in England get a much better idea of how tough their budgets are going to be over the next couple of years. And here I am in the Guildhall in York, where inside later on they'll be digesting some of the numbers to find out what it means for them. Let's bring in Keith Best, Assistant Director Financial Services here. Keith, is this the toughest budget you've ever had?
I would say this is the most difficult budget that we've faced over the last 10-15 years, particularly because the majority of the cuts are going to be in the first year of the settlement, so it's going to be really tough.
And what does that mean for services? I mean, lots of speculation in different parts of the country about what might be cut, but I guess it's up to local councils to make those decisions, and in your case, local people getting more involved.
Yeah, we do try to do that in York. We have traditionally a heavy involvement from the citizens of the city who take part in the budget consultation. We had around 12,000 responses to our survey last year, and they try to indicate what they feel the priorities are, where cuts should fall, where investment should take place, if there's any capacity for investment.
So which areas are looking vulnerable at the moment?
Well, most areas are looking vulnerable. Obviously, we like to protect the frontline services, particularly the vulnerable people in the city. Over and above that, you know, the cuts are so dramatic this year that most services will be impacted to some scale.
And this inevitably is going to mean some redundancies here, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously, the majority of the council spending is on staffing salaries. So when you, again, cuts to this scale, it can't be held without impacting staff in the city. We're looking at figures of over 300 staff potentially over the next 4 years.
And that again is perhaps, you know, the toughest on the jobs front that you've ever had to face.
Absolutely. I've never experienced anything like that in local government, cuts to that scale. Very dramatic.
And how much is that going to affect local communities here, do you think? I mean, are people going to really feel the impact, or can you absorb it in other ways and protect what are often described as frontline services?
Yeah, well, I mean, that essentially what we'll set out to do is protect the vulnerable, protect the frontline services, so the impact is not felt in the citizens who are paying the council tax. But inevitably, when you're taking out the resources of this scale, it's going to be difficult to manage it without those people at the front line seeing some impact.
And one of the problems you've had is that costs have been rising in recent years in some areas, and so it's just doing the same having the same amount of money, you sometimes see services shrinking anyway, and now we've got budgets shrinking. That puts you under even more pressure, doesn't it?
Absolutely, particularly in the field of social care, around adult social care. You know, the increase in the ageing population, that's bringing a heavy financial pressure onto the council, as it is with many other councils. And so we're having to deal with those pressures at the same time as facing some real budget reductions.
OK, Keith Best, thank you very much. And that funding announcement expected this afternoon, but this morning we get details of the government's localism bill, pushing power out from Whitehall to local councils and communities. So the government's argument is they're getting, well, less money, but a bit more power. A lot of people say, well, what we really need is the money to finance local services properly.
All right, Mike. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
and details of the localism bill and, of course, the council cuts that are going to be announced this afternoon throughout the day on the BBC News channel.